What's up, guys? I never do sit down videos, but here we are. I've been saying, I said last month for EDS Awareness Month I would make this video, but then I didn't. I was busy. But we're here. Better late than never. It's happening. I'm sitting down and doing it. So I tried my best to kind of make this organized. I wrote down some notes, so I'm going to try and go in like kind of an organized manner, but you guys know me. I like to go on my tangent, so I apologize for when it gets unorganized, because it probably will a little bit. But EDS and POTS are obviously a huge part of my life, as you have seen by my medical mystery vlogs. But I think they're really misunderstood these days, especially with the way that they've kind of gained like trendiness on TikTok, especially. I'm not on TikTok, but I've seen some of the stuff that's over there, and it's just not at all representative of what it's like to have these conditions. And obviously, I'm not saying that my experience is the same as anyone else's experience, because it's not. It's totally different. Everyone's experience is different, but there's just a lot that is not talked about. So I'm going to kind of go over my story and my experience, kind of starting with like my early signs and symptoms and starting to figure things out, to the testing I got done, how I got diagnosed, what we did from there, and then my current management. So Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a genetic connective tissue disease. There's a lot of different subtypes. The one that's the most common and the one that I have is the hypermobile type. So I didn't get diagnosed until May of 2024, last year. But kind of my whole life, if you look back, we could start to see the symptoms, but they just didn't get bad enough for me to pursue a diagnosis until the recent few years. But when I was younger, like, we kind of always knew like something was up, but like I said, never pushed for needing a diagnosis because it didn't interfere with my life too badly. But like some of those things were, I would get injured pretty often, and it wasn't just about me getting injured a lot, because that's kind of expected with the amount of sports that I did, but it's that the injuries did not heal either within a normal time frame or just ever. So like when I was in 5th grade, I got this stress fracture in my ankle, and like we had it in a brace, we had it in a boot, we had it in a cast, and it just like took forever to heal for what was really not that bad of an injury. So that was a little sus. Then I had knee tendonitis that I got from overuse in middle school, and it just pretty much never healed. It's manageable now, so I know how to manage it, but it kept me out of floor and vault for gymnastics for probably 5 years or so. Then in junior year of high school, I got a stress fracture in my foot, and that it literally just never healed. It's still there. It still hurts, but again, managed. Talk about that later. But yeah, like for that, like we had a boot, we had a cast, we had a boot. Like I think I had 2 or 3 MRIs on it over the course of like a year, and just nothing we did it just wouldn't heal no matter how much rest I took. So kind of after that, I like kind of implicitly understood, if I get injured, it's just never going to heal. So that's why whenever I get hurt, I just don't do anything about it and keep doing my sports, because I am totally happy to be in pain if I get to do things that I love. So basically off of that, when I hurt my ankle in my track meet a few years ago, I'm pretty sure it's in a vlog. I know I vlogged that day. So I fell 6 feet off a pole, smashed my ankle, probably broke it, not sure. But that's never healed. That's why I still wear an ankle brace all the time. You see it in my dance videos. There's always the brace on my foot. That's why I have to wear that, because otherwise it just hurts. So then other things, whenever I would get sick when I was younger, it would just like, I would be out for at least a month with just like the regular flu, stomach flu, whatever. It would take me out for a month. There was in junior year of high school, I was sick for so long that the school threatened to drop all of my credits because I had to stay home for so long. But I was just like dying. I could not like function. I was throwing up because I had the flu, and I just wouldn't get better from the regular flu. Like I got my blood tested and everything, because they were like, why is she not getting better? And it was just the regular old flu, and it just took me a month. And that's kind of what always happens when I get the flu. So I try really hard to not get sick. Past couple years, not jinxing, knock on wood, whatever, haven't gotten sick. And then another thing that started to point us more toward the direction of that something autoimmune might be happening, something systemic, was in high school, people started noticing like all the time my hands would turn purple even when it wasn't that cold. Like once it gets to like 65 degrees, my hands, my feet are purple and numb. And even if I'm like, don't feel cold, my hands and feet will still be freezing. And my physical therapist was actually the first one who kind of noticed this and like put together that something might be off systemically, because she knew that that was indicative of Raynaud's phenomenon, which is when your blood vessels just constrict too much whenever you get cold. And this can be totally benign. It can have nothing to do with a primary condition. It can be its own thing. But mine was secondary to the EDS, and it was indicative of something going on. So she was kind of the first one that started to point us in that direction, being like, you know, there might be something off. Because obviously she's my physical therapist, so she knew about all my injuries, and she knew that I was very super hypermobile flexible. They don't stretch me at physical therapy because you just can't. I feel nothing. So she kind of noticed those different things, and she was like, you should maybe get that checked out at some point. But nothing was bad enough at that point, and I was busy, so I didn't bother at that point in my life. And then a next thing that we started to notice was I was having my stomach issues. You guys have heard about this, but my stomach just like doesn't like to digest food. So in around high school, I started having more stomach pain, more bloating, all that type of stuff. It was starting to really affect me. And what happened that ended up pushing off a diagnosis for so long was that the doctors kind of dismissed me. The doctors that I had for this were like older men doctors. You know how they are with younger girls. I was like 15 and he treated me like a 5-year-old, but whatever. But basically, you know, young, teenage, skinny girl comes in and isn't eating that much because my stomach would hurt intensely anytime I ate any food, and I didn't know why. They pass it off as an eating disorder. So I never got any testing done. They never looked deeper into it because they're like, she just has an eating disorder. No, turns out I can't digest like most foods. But when I finally did get that figured out, biggest I told you so moment in my mind. So then getting into college was when I kind of started to notice myself that like this might actually be a problem, like something isn't right. So my stomach issues got worse going into college. I had a lot of stress in my life, so I do think that obviously contributed too. And then when I started track, that was when I started more intensely doing weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting movements. And I would always, like my first year doing it, I would always have these like very vague joint pains after my lifts. And like it wasn't a muscular problem. Like I had the strength to do the lifts that I was doing, and I could tell like it wasn't my muscles that hurt, but just this weird feeling. I didn't know how to describe it other than like my joints felt like loose. Or like if I overtrained during a week, like I would feel like my joints were like sliding apart, like they were melting but not hot. They were just like liquefying. That's the only way I can describe it. I don't know if anyone relates to that. If you do, let me know. So like that, when I started feeling that, that was like the first moment in my entire life where I was like, maybe I am hypermobile and not just flexible. Because my entire life, like 20 years of my life, I was like, people would say, oh, are you hypermobile? I'm like, no, I'm just really flexible. Like, I don't have pain or anything like that. Like, my joints don't dislocate. I'm just really flexible. And what masked the hypermobility is the fact that I did gymnastics and was strength training so intensely from such a young age that I never have dislocated anything, and hopefully won't, considering I still keep up very religiously with my strength training. But so that kind of masked the fact that it was hypermobility, because I was like, no, they're not, like, my joints aren't a problem. I'm just flexible. Like, I'm just really awesome and cool. No. I mean, I am awesome and cool, but I am hypermobile. So then we get to around 2023, and this is where I started to really have the symptoms come on that forced me to pursue a diagnosis that, like, they were very much impacting my quality of life, and I knew at that point that something was very wrong. So kind of beginning of 2023, I started passing out, not super often, but I would like have days where I would pass out or I would feel pretty lightheaded and dizzy throughout the day. I think likely this was just a blood pressure, orthostatic hypotension type of thing, not POTS yet at that point. And at that point, I would still have good days. Kind of probably at some point it was more good days than bad days, and then at other points it was 50-50, but good days existed. And then it was the end of 2023. Right at the end of October there was one. So POTS is interesting because it was triggered by something. So I have the predisposition to it because I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome that makes you very susceptible to have POTS. I didn't have it, and then something triggered it, and one day I had it. I remember it was October 31st, 2023. I was at track practice, and I'm climbing the rope, and then suddenly I'm like, I'm gonna pass out right now. And then like the rest of practice, like I had really bad chest pain. I was like, what is happening? And I tried to keep practicing, but then my coach made me go home and said, maybe you should go to the ER. And then I didn't do that. But it was fine. So anyway, so that's what happened. And then passing out became more frequent. Chest pain was pretty frequent, which I had never had chest pain before that specific day. And then I also started throwing up pretty often. I had no idea. Like, I had no idea that I had gotten POTS. I wasn't diagnosed until, I think, March 2024 with that. So I thought I was just like going insane. I'm like, why am I throwing up? Because to me, it felt like there was no rhyme or reason to why it was happening. Because I would throw up while walking to work. I would throw up after taking the elevator. I would throw up during track practice. I would throw up after sitting at home and eating lunch. Like, it felt like there was no pattern to it because the pattern was standing up, which I never would have noticed. And I was convinced, I knew what POTS was, but I was convinced that I didn't have it because I thought that since I had a low resting heart rate, that meant I couldn't have POTS, because I thought that POTS was just you having a high heart rate, but it actually has to do with the differential between your lying and standing heart rate, which means that me having a low resting heart rate actually makes it a lot worse, because when I'm lying down, my heart rate's usually in the 50s or 60s, and then unmedicated, uninfused, if I stand up, it can go up to 120, 130, even 140 sometimes. So then that rest of 2023 and all through 2024 was just like physically the worst time in my entire life. Like, I was throwing up almost every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. I was constantly dizzy, lightheaded. I was passing out like once a week, once every 2 weeks. I like could not function. The fatigue was one of the worst symptoms too. And it's something that you cannot understand unless you felt it, because like my whole life, I've always been super energetic, doing a million sports, and even like after a week of like 50,000 hours of training, I'd be like, dang, I'm tired. But that is nothing compared to the fatigue that comes with a chronic condition. It feels, I don't even know how to describe it. You just like, everything in your body feels like you got hit by a bus. Like, everything weighs 10,000 pounds, and moving a single muscle is the hardest thing in the entire world. So that is why I did not vlog for approximately a year. And like, honestly, like, it was just so bad. I was spending probably 15 hours a day in bed for pretty much most of 2024. Like January through December. December was when I started getting infusions. I could hardly function at all. I would still like get up. I would try and do yoga, and I would try and go to the gym 2 times a week, and I would like do my stuff, but take like 5 minutes of like sitting on the platform in between every set, because it was still a priority to me to do what I could to keep my body as healthy as I could, to keep my joints healthy and keep my heart healthy and my mental health sane. So I still did try and stay active, but it was incredibly difficult. So then moving on in terms of testing and when I started going to see doctors and what they did and how that kind of progressed. So in 2022, I wasn't having the passing out issues yet, but that was like when I was still having the stomach issues were pretty bad. The Raynaud's was pretty bad. Like my Raynaud's kind of got worse every single year up until like this past year. It hasn't been so bad, but I think that's also just because I'm not in track anymore, so I'm not forced to go outside when it's freezing. But so that's why I went to the room in 2022, and they didn't really test for much. Like they were kind of just like, yeah, you have Raynaud's, just get some heated socks, which I already have. So then I was like, well, that was stupid. And then I kind of just didn't go to the doctors for a while because I was like, what's the point? They're just not going to tell me anything. But in 2023, like I started having the passing out issues and the feeling dizzy once in a while. So my PCP also began suspecting like something might be off, autoimmune or connective tissue. So one of the things that can happen with connective tissue diseases is heart structure problems. So she ordered an echocardiogram, and I got that, and it showed some issues with the mitral valve. So that sent me to cardiology, who was again man doctor. He said, "Oh, you'll grow out of it. Your blood pressure is fine. Just you'll grow out of it," which is so. But like, so then I was convinced it wasn't my blood pressure. So then that's another thing that kind of threw me off the path of like POTS and blood pressure as a problem, because it's like, well, this cardio said it's not an issue. So I didn't try like increasing salt or anything like that, which to be fair didn't end up working anyway in the future, but like it just totally threw me off the track of what ended up actually being the problem. So then the rest of 2023, beginning of 2024, I was kind of just like passed around between doctors. My old medical system that I was in until the beginning of 2024 was an outpatient system. There was no like hospital. They did not have like their own hospitals. It wasn't like a university system. So the resources were not great. They were not equipped to handle complex conditions or diagnoses. So there wasn't much that their specialists could do because they did not have the resources to give me the testing that I needed. And when you're in a different medical system, you can try and see specialists in other systems, but they really don't like to accept people outside of their system who like aren't in their primary care. So, I mean, me and my mom spent months calling like every single specialist in the state of Illinois and got denied and denied and denied and denied. And then finally, like my doctor's like, we might just need to call Mayo Clinic. So then we applied for Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic denied me because I was out of their scope and they did not want my case. So that was disheartening. And at that point, we were kind of just like, we are out of options with this current medical system that I'm in. So what we did is I switched over to Northwestern for my primary care. And this was the best thing I could have ever possibly done, because once I was in the Northwestern system, and like keep in mind, we had called Northwestern, their specialist, to try and schedule appointments when I was a patient at my other medical system, but because I was not a primary Northwestern patient, they wouldn't accept me there. But since I switched to primary care with Northwestern, so I am now their patient. So my first appointment with my new primary care doctor, she was like, I was telling her like all the things that were going on, and she was just like, surprised face emoji. And she put in urgent referrals to rheumatology, cardiology, neurology, and gastroenterology just immediately. And I was like, oh my God, like a doctor who's actually doing something to try and figure this out. It was crazy. It was absolutely life-changing. So I got all those referrals, and then also kind of on the same page, around the same time frame, I went to track meet. I tried to compete track my last season, and try is kind of the only way to describe it. It happened. We made it, kind of. But anyway, so at track meet that month, I ended up having to go to the ER. So that also then sped up my cardiology referral even further, because I had to go to the ER for cardiac issues. So things, January 2024, things really expedited. So I went to cardiology. I got a new echocardiogram. They had me wear one of those like 24/7 heart monitors for a month. I only lasted 3 weeks because my skin reacted so badly to it, though. Another story, but crazy. I got a cardiac stress test. So that's like a treadmill max output test, which was pretty interesting to me because I'd actually studied it and administered them in my exercise testing and prescription class the year before. So pretty cool to do it again. And I was able to compare the data from when I did it in my class while not having POTS to then doing it while having POTS. Yikes. Not not good, not good. And then I also got a tilt table test. So that was the main test that really showed that I have POTS. It's the golden standard for diagnosing POTS. So essentially you get strapped to a table and you're hooked up to an EKG and a blood pressure monitor and then also an IV. So they strap you in and you're laying flat for 5 minutes. They're measuring your vitals constantly. Then they tilt you up to 70 degrees and they keep you here for 40 minutes and then lay you back down again. But they only keep you up for either 40 minutes or until you pass out. I passed out after 3 minutes. So my mom brought me to the appointment, and so she was waiting in the waiting room expecting like me back in an hour, and then like 20 minutes later it's like, hey. She's like, why are you already back? So yeah, nurse said that was the fastest she'd ever seen anyone pass out. It was not fun. Like, I didn't expect them to find anything because I'd had so many like bad doctor's appointments and like denials before. I was like, whatever, like nothing's gonna happen. It's just gonna be something dumb. And they tilted me up. I felt like I was gonna throw up and die immediately. So then they put me back down and they gave me fluids and then I woke back up and it was all good. We got the results back from that and it was like, you got POTS and orthostatic hypotension. But it took a while before I actually got the diagnosis because I had to do the rest of the testing first just to make sure there wasn't anything else. So then I also got, with rheumatology, an autoimmune blood workup, which is crazy. They take so much of your blood. I passed out during that because we didn't know I had low blood volume at the time. They took like 12 vials in one go. And I was out for like 5 minutes. I was out for so long that I was dreaming while I was passed out in the blood draw chair. So then with neurology at Northwestern, they actually said my case was too complex for them, so they sent me to the U Chicago headache and dizziness clinic. So they do a lot of specialized stuff with people who are suffering from dizziness, which can be due to potential eye problems, other neurological problems, inner ear problems. So I got all these crazy tests. So one of them was called computerized dynamic posturography. So that's like, they have like these artificial walls around you and they have you stand on just like a platform in the middle, and then the walls will move around or the platform will move around and they test your balance. So that can kind of test for problems with balance and inner ear stuff. Then the next one was vestibular evoked myogenic potentials. I don't remember too much about this one. I think they like attached some electrodes to my head and then I think there were sounds and they had me react to the sounds. I don't really remember. A lot happened that day. I got all this stuff done in one day. So then next was video nystagmography. This was crazy. So it started off pretty normal. Like they put some goggles on me that tracked my eye movements. And then like I would look at things crossing a screen and whatever, like look at some letters, look at some towns passing by, like they're just tracking where my vision goes. But then what they do is, so you still have the goggles on, so they can track your pupils. They put these hoses in your ears, one ear at a time, and for 30 seconds, they flush you with hot water that's 110 degrees or cold water that's 30 degrees. Both were terrible, but the hot water literally felt like my brain was on fire, and it's for 30 seconds, and it just like so much water, and it's supposed to make you dizzy, but it's like the most dizzy you could ever even imagine. And they showed me like the video of my eyes afterwards, and it literally looked like a glitch. It was like, it was crazy. But basically they do that to test like the crystals in your ear, if they're reacting to it the correct way. So if you do react to it correctly, then you will get dizzy. But then I threw up. So that was fun. And then last was video head impulse testing. So they had different goggles on, still tracking my eyes, but then there would be someone grabbing my head and they just like move it really fast in weird directions. And yeah, so that's what I got. So then my gastro appointment was the last one of all of them, and by the time we got to there, we were kind of like, this is definitely the vomiting is definitely a result of a neurological problem, not a gastroenterological problem. Because by that point, I had already resolved my stomach issues with my diet, so that wasn't an issue. It was just the vomiting. So we were like, pretty sure that's a neurological issue. Let's figure that out, and you can come back if we need you to come back. Which I did end up having to come back in August 2024 because I was still, like I said, I was just down and out the entirety of 2024, throwing up every single day. And they were like, you gotta check your esophagus, girl. So I did get an endoscopy. Fortunately, my esophagus was good. That's unrelated. But yeah, so after all of that testing, I finally got the POTS diagnosis from my PCP and my cardiologist. And there's just not a lot of knowledge about POTS, so they didn't really have that many recommendations for me, but I'll get into that in a second. So the other diagnosis, the Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis, it was something we had been suspecting, like I said. So Northwestern is partnered with a group that has some doctors that specialize in Ehlers-Danlos, POTS, systemic autoimmune connective tissue disorders like that. So I found out about her and got an appointment with her. And she is literally my lifesaver. Like, absolute godsend. I would be like not alive without her, literally. So I went to her in May of last year, and my first appointment, I was there for like 5 hours. Like, she goes in depth. So I got a very clear hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome diagnosis there, and then she finally started me on a real treatment plan. So when I got diagnosed with just POTS, they kind of gave me the first line treatments, which are very basic, and they'll work for some cases. Some people can get by just fine with it if they have a mild case. That was not the case for me. But so the first things they typically recommend for POTS are increasing hydration. So I was already drinking 100 to 120 ounces of water a day, and it wasn't helping. Then they want you to increase salt and other electrolytes too. So I started trying these electrolyte pills that had salt or sodium and potassium. What ended up happening, does not happen for like, I've never heard of it happening with anyone else with POTS. I don't know why it happened with me, but just increased my potassium just that little bit. It sent my potassium levels to like dangerously high. And if your potassium levels get too high, like your heart will stop. So we incidentally caught that on a blood test, and we were like, okay, stop those pills now. No more all electrolytes, only sodium. So now I take salt tabs. So 2 grams of salt twice a day, dissolve it in a little bit of water, and take a nice shot of salt water. Delicious. But yeah, I have no idea why my potassium levels were high. My diet is extremely low in potassium because of all my restrictions. But there's always something that remains a mystery. So those are the 2 things they'll recommend first, and then they'll recommend managing nutrition. So the typical things for POTS to do with nutrition is you want to have smaller meals more frequently, because when you have too large of a meal or a meal that's too high percentage in carbs, that causes more blood to be diverted to digestion, because the digestive system needs to do more work, and that means you have less blood circulating through your body, which you need extra badly for POTS because you need the blood to get up to your brain. So That's why if you have POTS or you know someone with POTS and after they have a big meal or a carb heavy meal, they feel worse, that's why. And then they also recommend strength training. Obviously, when your muscles are stronger, your blood flow will be better. I was already doing that to a very extreme level. There was not really any more I could do to make that any better. So I just was really kind of out of runway to use those methods to try and improve my symptoms. Because like I said with nutrition, I was already on my diet that I used to manage my stomach issues. I was already a nutritionist, already certified personal trainer. I got that on lock. So I was kind of just out of runway. I didn't have any room to use those lifestyle methods to help treat my symptoms. So after going to my doctor, who specializes in the POTS and EDS, she started me on a treatment plan. So we started conservatively and then just moved towards more aggressive treatments when the conservative ones didn't work. So what we tried first was a medication called fludrocortisone, which is supposed to make the body retain more salt and more water. Somehow, it did the opposite effect for me. I already have like the world's smallest bladder. I go to the bathroom like 20 times a day. But somehow, when I started taking this medication, it made that even worse, and I was literally having to pee like 3 times an hour. Like I was going like, I counted once, I was going like 40 times a day, which is ridiculous. And no one could figure out why on earth that was happening. I told my uncle who's a doctor about it, and he was trying to figure out, and like he's looking things up and like thinking for like 20 minutes, and then he just goes, medically, this makes no sense. So I stopped that medication because obviously it wasn't helping my symptoms and it was introducing more problems. So then next we tried medication called desmopressin, which is also a medication that makes you retain water, and it does so through a different pathway. So we tried that, and it did help with going to the bathroom less. Thank goodness. I was tired of the 40 times a day, exhausting. But it didn't help with my symptoms, and as we started to increase the dose, it started to cause me some stomach pain, so we discontinued it. So then the next line of treatment was my stellate ganglion block, which I vlogged, so check that out. It's pretty crazy. Like, that's the craziest medical thing I've ever had done. Like, they had this, like, 2-inch long needle all the way into the center of my neck. I could feel it next to my throat. Like, they didn't numb me before just doing the needle. That's not a spot of your body you should ever be able to feel. It was crazy. And then they showed me the x-ray with it. But anyway, it didn't work. But essentially the concept of that is like they inject a cocktail of anesthetics into your stellate ganglion, which is a sympathetic nerve ganglion. So, sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight nervous system. So the idea is that when you have POTS and your heart rate is kind of always spiking, that the sympathetic nervous system is too active. So when they inject this cocktail of stuff, it's kind of like, did you turn it off and back on again to get it to calm down? And it works with some people with POTS, particularly in the long COVID population. But since that's not where my POTS came from, it was less likely to work for me, and it didn't. So then after that, there were no other options. So there are other medications. There are a lot of medications that you can take for POTS. I was contraindicated to most of them because of, one, my low resting heart rate, because with that I couldn't take a medication that lowers your heart rate like propranolol or other beta blockers, because even though we want my heart rate to be lower when I'm standing or when I'm active, if it's lower when I'm resting, it will just stop. So that wasn't an option. And then there's other medications, like beta blockers do this as well, but my blood pressure is really low. So other medications that lower your heart rate will also lower your blood pressure. So I couldn't do that. And then there's a medication called midodrine, and the way that it works for people with POTS is it causes your blood vessels to constrict so that your blood will flow more up to your head and not pool in your legs. That wasn't an option for me, as the aforementioned Raynaud's already causes my blood vessels to constrict to a point where it is problematic. So that's why I had so few options with medications. So after the medications didn't work, after the stellate ganglion block didn't work, that was when we moved on to infusions, which is kind of a last resort treatment because of how much of your life it takes up, how dependent you are on them. Because if I miss an infusion, then I feel worse. Like I need it to function. And it takes up a lot of your day. It's a lot easier to improve your blood volume by taking a medication that does that for you, just taking a pill every morning. But that was not the path for me. So yeah, finally, December, I started my infusions, and it's just crazy that they just work immediately, because essentially you are manually fixing the problem. So POTS can be caused by a few different things. For me, it's the fact that I have low blood volume, so essentially there's not enough blood like circulating throughout my body. So like, this is a metaphor I like to use. If your blood volume is only 60% full, if you're laying down, the blood's getting to your brain, it's getting to your feet, you're all good, you're getting oxygen everywhere you need it to go. But then when you stand up, the blood is not filling the vessel of my body. It's not getting up to my brain anymore. I pass out. So the infusion is me filling up the rest of the water bottle. And so it literally worked immediately. And it took, like, I noticed the difference immediately, but it took a few months of it before I got to the point where I am now, where like I feel fully functional all the time. The infusions are lasting as long as they need to. Like the first few times, like the relief would only last like maybe a day or two. Now it almost always consistently lasts until my next infusion. So it's great. So now onto the ways that I manage it currently and am able to feel as good as I feel and do all the things that I'm doing now that you're seeing on the vlogs. Like, I'm finally able to live my best life again after 2 years of barely being able to live life at all. Like, going back to the fatigue, like, it was so bad that for almost a year, I did not feel bored ever, because I was just simply too tired to even have the mental or physical energy to consider wanting to do anything or even think about anything. Like, my brain didn't even work. It was crazy. But now we are so back. So how I'm managing it is I get the infusions twice a week. It's 2 liters of saline. They usually overfill the bags, so I probably get closer to 2.5 liters. But so I go to the hospital for that twice a week. You guys know the drill if you've been watching my vlogs. And it feels pretty normal to me now. Like, it just feels like going to work or whatever. It's just like a normal part of my life. So I don't mind it at all. I watch my avatar, I watch some YouTube, I get some work done. So that's really what manages the bulk of my symptoms. If I did not have the infusions, I would be right back to where I was last year, where I was at my worst. Then for stomach issues, what I do to manage that is I'm on a modified low FODMAP diet. So what I had to do is, it's kind of a long process. It took probably about a year or so, and you kind of eliminate all of these different types of foods for 4 to 6 weeks until your symptoms start to go away. And then you reintroduce each group one by one in a strategic way to see which one and what amounts of it that you react to. So I found out that I react pretty badly to garlic, onion, fructose, and sorbitol. So now I no longer eat foods that contain those, and my diet is pretty boring. I enjoy it. I eat the same things mostly every day. I think they're good. So I'm fine with it, because my stomach doesn't hurt anymore, and it used to hurt literally 24/7. Then strength training, obviously super important. The number one reason why Ehlers Danlos does not affect me in the way that it affects a lot of people, where they're having these dislocations, these injuries, back pain, back problems, chronic pain. All of this is super common with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. A lot of times the pain is people's worst symptom. And for me, it's really not a problem at all. And I 100% attribute that to strength training. So I'm always going to keep that up in my life. And then for cardio, I mostly do, at this point, I'm mostly doing dance and walking for that. I wasn't able to dance for a while, so I would force myself to get on the stationary bike, but I hate the stationary bike. So now I get to do the fun stuff. And then, I love walking my dog. So that's great to keep my cardio up and my endurance up. Then also, as I mentioned before, physical therapy is important with just managing those leftover injuries I have that just never fully healed. It's just kind of like my weekly tune-up, Managing my sleep schedule, very important. My body very much needs consistency. I need the extra recovery of sleep. I require more sleep than most people. Like, I need my 8 to 10 hours, or like, it's just not a good day. So, sleep schedule, consistency in my schedule, and then pacing myself. I talked about this a little bit in my LA vlog. It just, no matter what, I'm always going to have limits. There is no cure for POTS. There is no cure for EDS, but there is management and there is remission. And I'm in a state of remission right now where my symptoms are not interfering with my quality of life that much anymore. And it's awesome. But I have to make sure that I'm respecting the limits that my body has. So that's a lot of trial and error. It's getting to know you and your specific body, your specific circumstances, and how your body reacts to things. Because like for me, my body's used to strength training because I've done it my whole life. So that's not something that flares me up even when I have a hard workout. But then if I do something that I don't do very often, even if it's technically easier than strength training, it might affect me more because it's just not something my body's used to. And then, of course, I do still take a variety of medications and supplements, but I'm not going to get into that information. That's going to be different for everybody. Discuss that with your doctor. And then, of course, the fact that I have a remote job is a huge factor in why I'm able to live my life the way that I do. If I had to be in person for work 40 hours a week, I would not have the energy to be like traveling and doing all of the different workouts that I get to do and having as much fun as I get to do, because that would take up most of the energy that I have, because like I said, it is still limited. So I am very, very grateful, very blessed to have the job that I have that allows me to have the flexibility that I need both to manage my illness and to still live my life. So yeah, I think I've talked enough, but I hope that was interesting. I hope that gave you some insight into like hypermobile Ehlers Danlos isn't just hee hee ha ha, I'm flexible, so much fun. And POTS isn't just, OMG, I get dizzy when I stand up. Like, that's not it at all. It really affects every aspect of your life. It can be, like, I mean, for 2 years, it was basically life-ruining. And it's not that bad for everybody. For some people, it is just that they do get dizzy standing up. And if they have some extra salt in their diet, they feel better. But that is not the case for everyone at all. It can be just absolutely devastating. So I hope that helps you learn about the experience. If you know someone who has this, or if you're considering you might have it, I hope it gives you some direction to figure out kind of what the steps to pursue a diagnosis might be like. But if you have any questions, I'm sure there's things I forgot to say, just comment down below. I'm super open about it. So anything you are curious about, I will happily answer. Thanks, guys. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. New shorts posted every day, new long form videos every Friday, and we'll see you next time.